Good evening. The school board meeting for March 14th, 2017 is now in session. We would like to thank all of you who are in attendance with us in person or watching the meeting from another location for investing your time and energy to join us. We appreciate and applaud your commitment to partnering with us in support of our schools, our students, our staff, and our community. While the board and Brevard Public School staff members are fully committed to doing our best to ensure excellence in Brevard Public Schools, we know that our success depends heavily on an engaged and committed community to work alongside us and help us to continually improve. Thank you for being active participants in the process. Pam, roll call, please.
Mrs. Belford?
Present.
Mr. Craig?
Present.
Mrs. Descovich?
Present.
Mr. Susan?
Here.
And Mr. Ziegler?
Here.
At this time, I would like to hold a moment of silence for members of our BPS family who have recently passed away. Roxana Werner, a teacher from Cambridge Elementary, John Spio, an 11th grade student from Titusville High, and Jean Justice, a Central Area bus driver. Our thoughts and hearts are with their families and friends. This evening, we have two students from Melbourne High School to assist with the pledge and invocation. 11th grade student Anthony Hires will read the invocation, and Kelly Snellman, also in 11th grade, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I ask that you both remain at the podium so we have an opportunity to learn more about you when you are done. If you all would please approach the podium.
Teach children music, physics, and philosophy, but most importantly, music for the patterns in music and all the arts are the keys to learning, like Plato.
I'd like to lead us with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Kelly, since you're still at the microphone, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, my name is Kelly Snellman. I'm an 11th grader at Melbourne High School. I have two dogs. One is named Rosie, and one is named Titus, and one is my brother's, and Rosie is mine. I have two leopard geckos. One is named Jimmy, and one is named Gex, and one is a girl and one is a boy.
Very good. So you mentioned that one of the dogs is your brother's, but did you claim your brother as being your brother?
Pardon?
Did you claim your brother? Did you say, I have a brother? Like, were you taking ownership of him, or were you just giving him ownership of the dog?
One of the dogs is my brother's.
Got it, okay. So what do you like to do other than obviously music?
Oh, I'm in the marching band at my school and the color guard, and since it's the winter season, we're doing winter guard, and we compete in the FFCC circuit.
Okay, very good. What do you like best about your school?
I like best that our school has a nice range of people, and our school supports the academics alongside the fine arts.
Excellent. Is there anything you would change about your school?
I would personally like to add another class to the school that focuses more like an incubator that can start sparking new ideas.
Okay, interesting idea. Did you hear that, Dr. Blackburn? Excellent. Very good. Thank you, Kelly, for joining us this evening. Do you have family with you?
Pardon?
Do you have family with you this evening?
No.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you. Anthony, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've played violin for at least 7 years. I really enjoy most of the programs here at Mel High, and everything here is pretty much perfect. I like it here. The only thing I would actually change here is at least I would like a couple more classes added, more focused on music as we have added some this year, and a little bit, I guess a little bit more art classes, because I also love art.
Very good. So I have to give you kudos for anticipating the questions I was going to ask you and just answering them. Do you have any family here with you this evening, Anthony?
No, ma'am, I don't.
So let me ask you, what is it that you like about violin?
The sound quality in it, it's very attracting. I like it. It's just something about it. It makes you want to play more.
Very nice. Is that your first instrument? Did you just jump right into violin and fall in love with it, or did you bounce around and try out a couple beforehand?
I jumped right into it. It was like the only instrument that I really liked to play.
Okay. And what do you like doing beyond you? It says here you have no pets. You do, however, have a brother?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Excellent. And do you like doing other things? I've got a couple other things down here that are not really music related that you may be interested in. Would you like to share?
Well, some of them I haven't listed on there, but I like to play video games. I sometimes go outside and play football with my little brother. I also love fishing at times and art, as I said earlier.
Okay. And I've got a little note here that says you do some volunteering. Is that true?
Yes, I do volunteering.
Where do you volunteer?
Well, I guess I would say my dad's friends' companies. Like, we go there and I volunteer, or either I just go to the park and play for people.
Okay. Very nice. Well, thank you both for joining us this evening. We appreciate it very much. Prior to the board meeting, we've had the pleasure of listening to the Melbourne High School Chamber Orchestra under the direction of Michelle Fry, orchestra director, and Gary Musso, string consultant. The students will perform one more number. However, please give us just a few moments for the board to move to the front so we can enjoy your performance even further.
Hi, I'm Michelle Fry, I teach orchestra at Melbourne High School. Our string consultant is Gary Musso. We are preparing for state music performance assessment next month in Tampa. This is one of the pieces we are playing for state. It is called Five Variants of Dives and Lazarus by Rafe Vaughan Williams. We are playing the fourth and fifth variant.
That was absolutely amazing. Thank you very much, students. We appreciate you joining us this evening, and I have to tell you, I am envious of your talent. Audience, if you would please give them another round of applause for the great job they did. We are going to take a brief recess to give the students an opportunity to remove their belongings, and then we will resume the school board meeting. So please bear with us.
I don't see him. Oh, there he is. No, he's in the back. Okay.
And we are back in session. Before we move into agenda, I would like to offer my fellow board members the opportunity to recognize staff, students, or community members. Ms. Deskovich.
I have two quick ones. I spent a few hours out at the Adult Education Center at Clear Lake, and so a shout out to Jeff Arnott and his staff. Turns out, I didn't know, but we have one of the best adult education programs in the state, and it was a fantastic morning. I got to see a lot of the programs in all parts of the school, and I was highly impressed. And I also had the opportunity to attend The Wizard of Oz at Ugali High School, which is one of Mr. Susan's schools, but I ventured out over there, and we have talented students there, and they have a great program going. It was a wonderful performance. That's all I got.
Very good. Thank you. Other board members? Mr. Craig.
Thank you. Got to visit Anderson Elementary and specifically Teresa Sikora's fifth grade class. Delivered a mini grant check from Brevard Schools Foundation for a rocket project that she's doing with her fifth graders. They're looking at the volume, how volume affects whether volume of solid or liquid propellants in rockets, and utilizing many of their newfound scientific and math skills in that project. But what was really neat was they were discussing Bernoulli's principle at the time, and so we had ended up doing a long discussion, and I got to go up against a fifth grader in using Bernoulli's principle to blow up a long tube of air, which he of course beat me at because he understood the principle even better than I did, which was really cool to see. But the discussion afterwards, I got to tell you, once we established that I was a pilot, and that I had everybody had a lot of questions about airfoils, and we just got into a huge discussion about how to change the camber of an air wing and airfoil, and how to get pressure differentials and stuff. And I'm realizing that these kids are in 5th grade, and they are asking me questions that are completely relevant. They understood the answers and would go beyond what I even asked. And so what Teresa Sikora is doing there at Anderson is, I know, is just a sliver of what's happening in this district. So I really appreciated that time there. We haven't, I think we missed last time congratulating the West Shore boys to a soccer champions, state champions. I don't think we recognize that, and I don't think we recognize the Marin Island girls Class 3A state champions. That happened back in February, but I think that is just phenomenal. And then the Marin Island boys were the runner-ups in their soccer championship as well for the state. And then we have at Palm Bay High School, Matt Cates won the Class 2A 170-pound state wrestling championship. So pretty impressive last couple weeks at state levels.
Mr. Susan.
Had the great opportunity to go see the robotics competition in Orlando last week and talk about being well represented with a very enthusiastic crowd. It was our students over there between Melbourne and Titusville, a Cocoa Quasi School, and a couple other ones. We were looking amazing. To see the kids that into it and then winning. I mean, we have championship teams that are coming out of it, and we're approving some of their field trips tonight. And, you know, Melbourne High School came to me and said, you know, 2 years ago we did this and we couldn't go all the way because we had to raise money. So they're in the process of raising $30,000 and they're only at 12 right now. So might have to do some crowdfunding. Also, it's a birthday. It's Belford's 32nd birthday. Just want to let everybody know that. Congratulate her on her birthday. O'Galley Aviation Program got a helicopter donated to it yesterday.
Cool.
And it is growing. We will probably have our own air fleet to fly to Tallahassee pretty soon here after they're done with McGinnis gets to take over half the airport down there. I also see my Sun Tree crowd over here. Thanks for coming out. Miss Giambetti and all the staff over there and everything else. Great people. I have no money on a daily basis because the PTO has an event every other night and hits us up. And then just wanted to say, you know, it's great schools in this county. Great opportunity to be a part of. So.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ziegler.
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning the robotics there, Mr. Susan. I too attended the Orlando Regional Robotics Competition. Before I talk about that, there are multiple regional competitions, and our teams travel around to compete their robots. They're not battle robots. They're designed to perform a function and compete in an alliance with other robots to win a competition. And the Southern Florida Regional, Melbourne High School's Team Voltage placed 6th place, and they get to advance on to the World Champions. The Team 33 pink team, which is Cocoa Beach, Rockledge, Sierra, Space Coast High, got 7th place. They've also got the Dean's List Finalist Award, which is a great honor for them. And Team 21 Combat, which is Titusville Astronaut High, got 30th place. That was the South Florida Regional. Now, there are about 60 teams competing in these competitions, so scoring coming in tricky near the top is actually very impressive because these robots are built by the kids, and when they get there and they start competing, things start happening, and they got to fix them on the fly, and it's very interesting. So the Orlando Regional Team Voltage got 16th place, Team 33, the pink team, 17th place. Bionic Tigers, which is Cocoa High, was 24th place. Combat Titusville Astronaut 28th place, and Merritt Island High School 801 Horsepower 33rd place, and the Bionic Bears Bayside High 35th place. So pretty darn good out of a field of 60 teams for us to score that high. Congratulations to those teams and to all of our teacher leads who lead those students in their daily robot builds. I mean, every day after school and Saturdays and Sundays for, I think it's for 6 weeks prior to the competition. Those kids work on those things. So congratulations to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ziegler. I had the opportunity to join our students for the Space Coast Odyssey of the Mind competition. And what an exciting and interesting event. The creativity that our students bring forward it just truly is amazing. And tons of fun had in the process. So that always is a bonus in my world if they can do great things and also have fun while doing it. So that was wonderful. Like Mr. Craig, had the opportunity to deliver a mini grant check to Atlantis Elementary, and want to both thank the teachers who put forward the initiative to apply for these grants and develop projects for their students beyond the regular scope of the curriculum, and also, of course, thank our foundation for all of the work that they do in working with our community to be able to provide support for those types of initiatives. Had the opportunity last week to attend the Materials Adoption Conference with Dr. Sullivan and Jane Klein and Robin Novelli, and I'm forgetting one person. Tara Taylor was there. How could I forget Tara Taylor? Excellent event, really makes you think, and we'll have some great brainstorming sessions going forward as to how we can implement those activities. And then finally, I would like to thank my fellow board members. Today has been a long day. We started together at 8 o'clock this morning with interviews for our in-house general counsel moving forward, and then had some expulsion hearings in the midst of that, and then reconvened for more interviews. And you all truly have been troopers today. I know it's been a long day, but I appreciate your continued passion and commitment to getting through the process, and then being here tonight with smiles on to address the business of the board and the district. So I thank you all for your patience in that process. And that brings us to the adoption of the agenda. Dr. Blackburn.
Mrs. Belford and members of the board, on tonight's agenda, we have administrative staff recommendations, one resolution, 19 consent items, 6 action items, and 2 information items, as well as 1 more discussion item. You also have the yellow supplemental agenda, which are changes made to the agenda since being released to the public. There was a consent item addition, item F29, on the termination of instructional employee Karen Williams.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
It is moved by Mr. Craig and seconded by Mr. Susan that we adopt the agenda for the March 14th board meeting. Any discussion? Please vote. And the vote passes 5-0. Dr. Blackburn, I'm going to go off script slightly because I realized just as I turned it to you for the adoption of the agenda that I failed to give you the opportunity for recognition along with the board members. Was there anything that you wanted to add there?
But I would like to thank Sheriff Wayne Ivey and his deputies. I attended a basketball game on Friday at Oak Valley High School, where the sheriff and his deputies really played alongside some pretty talented students from Oak Valley, all in the name of anti-bullying. So it was great to see our kids and our law enforcement officers working together, getting to know each other. That was really, really good. And today is a really special day, Mrs. Belford. Today is March 14th. And for those of you who have not been initiated into the American Association of Math Geeks, like I have,
It's Pi Day.
it's Pi Day. So very, very special day. It's Pi Day.
Show your cufflinks.
Thank you, Dr. Blackburn. Now, would you please tell us about the administrative staff recommendations on this evening's agenda?
Absolutely. There are 8 administrative staff personnel for you to consider tonight.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve. We already did that, didn't we?
I have a motion from Mr. Craig, and was that a second from Mr. Ziegler?
I guess when the mics don't come on quick enough.
Yes. So I have a motion to approve the administrative staff recommendations on this evening's agenda. Motion by Mr. Craig, seconded by Mr. Ziegler. Is there any discussion? Please vote. Dr. Blackburn. Oh, passes 5-0.
Please join me in recognizing Michelle Giambetti, principal at Suntree Elementary, on her upcoming retirement effective May 31, 2017. Ms. Giambetti, thank you for your years of service to our district and to our students. I believe Mr. Reed is going to hand her the note.
Do you want to say a few words?
Thank you all very much. I only promised to come if I didn't have to say anything, but no, I'm only teasing. Too much to say in too few words, but it's been a wonderful 35 years, pride of my life, and I will certainly miss everyone that has touched my life during that time period. So thank you all.
Next, we welcome Mr. Randy George and congratulate him on his reclassification from the position of IT Business Analyst to the position of Director of Management Information Systems.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Blackburn and school board members, for the opportunity to serve in this capacity. I'm looking forward to serving with Mr. Cheatham and ET and all the other staff here at Brevard Public Schools. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Blackburn, that moves us to resolutions and proclamations.
Yes, Mrs. Goldberg, there is one item under this category. Item C10 is to recognize and proclaim the board's commitment to district-wide voluntary desegregation. Madam Reed, Assistant Superintendent of Government and Community Relations, will read it for us. Mr. Reed.
Okay, this is a resolution regarding the Magnet Schools Assistance Program, or MSAP, as I've heard it described around here. Whereas public schools are the backbone of our democracy, providing young people with the tools they need to maintain our nation's precious values of freedom, civility, and equality, and whereas education is most effective in a diverse, integrated setting, and that therefore a major purpose of Magnet Schools Assistance Program is to provide a framework for actions designed to promote diversity so that the isolation of racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic groups is avoided and the full benefits of integration are achieved. And whereas magnet schools attract a diverse population of students by conducting lessons that integrate comprehensive reform methods and innovative themes with state and national standards. And whereas this resolution and the MSAP grant application are revisions to the desegregation plan, and whereas the school board agrees to adopt and implement the new proposed magnet school programs upon the award of assistance under the Magnet Schools Assistance Program grant funding. Now, therefore, the School Board of Brevard County, Florida does hereby recognize the establishment of the new Science, Technology, Engineering, Art, and Mathematics, STEAM, magnet school programs at South Lake Elementary, Palm Bay Elementary, and Rockledge High School this March 14th, 2017.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
It is moved by Mr. Craig, seconded by Ms. Deskovich, to approve the resolution recognizing and proclaiming the board's commitment to district-wide voluntary desegregation. Is there any discussion? Please vote. And board members, as you are voting, I'm being told that your mics are not working very well. So please, if you are speaking, speak directly into your mic so they can pick it up on the taping and streaming. And the motion passes 5-0. We are now at public comments. The maximum allotted time for each speaker is 3 minutes. Please be reminded that statements shall be directed to the board chairperson. No person may address or question board members individually. The board chairperson may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement when the statement is too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, obscene, or irrelevant. If an individual does not observe reasonable decorum, the board chairperson may request that individual leave the meeting. Please keep in mind that we often have children present and/or children viewing our board meetings, and we encourage an environment appropriate for them. Comments regarding agenda items up for action will be considered when making our decisions. Additionally, board members may assist with connecting public speakers to district staff that can assist with concerns, respond in brief to comments made by speakers that require immediate clarification, request that a response to specific speakers be placed on the school board's website under the section called For the Record. These responses will take place at the end of the public comment portion of the meeting. For those of you who are here to speak on the materials adoption, the textbook adoptions, those individuals will be allowed to speak during the public hearing section of the meeting. So while we typically call speakers in order of sign up, we will be going slightly out of order so that those speakers speaking on the materials adoption will be given the opportunity to speak prior to the discussion of the material adoption. So with that being said, we have 3 speakers for the public discussion portion of the meeting. In this order, Vanessa Skipper, Janet Vidito, and Marcus Hockman. If you all would please make your way toward the microphone. And Ms. Skipper, you are up first.
Good evening. Vanessa Skipper, Vice President, Brevard Federation of Teachers. Dan and Anthony wanted me to pass along a message as they are unable to be here tonight. They are currently listening to a faculty at a school where there are some continued issues. We have reached out behind the scenes about this particular school, but they are listening now to teachers who feel that they are not being respected, and a chunk of the faculty is already starting to ask about the transfer period. They asked me not to name the school, but they will be reaching out to you guys with feedback they get tonight. On a more positive note, I would like to thank all of the district personnel and board members who assisted us in changing a very important deadline that came up this week. Teachers' grades were due at 5 p.m. on Thursday, and it just was how it fell on the calendar, because the grading period closed on Tuesday. And we do appreciate the extension to noon on Friday, since all day Friday is slated for teacher planning and grades. The 2017-2018 calendar has the same issue, so I feel like that's something we could probably fix now, so we're not scrambling next year. Grades close on March 13th, 2018, and teachers' grades are due 2 days later. So the 18th is another teacher planning day, so we would like to request that teachers receive the full day on Friday to process their grades on March 18th, 2018. I'd also like, on that same note, to request that a teacher sit on the calendar committee, if there is one. If there's not one, we should have one, and maybe have an elementary teacher and a secondary teacher maybe speak about some of the issues that come up throughout the year as they relate to classrooms and grades and deadlines. Also, the budget, very positive story, I feel like, in the Florida Today about BFT working with the district and with you guys about the budget. I do appreciate very much that teachers are being made a priority in the district. Obviously, I think, of course, I represent the teachers. We've got a little bit further to go. I appreciate the comment about Tallahassee giving more funding, adding more funding to that percentage for raises. I'd also like to take a second to thank a couple senators. You guys might have heard Senate Bill 964 introduced by Senators Mayfield and Munford, which is a truly bipartisan look at trying to fix some of the testing issues in our classrooms. And I'd like everyone to work with us in reaching out to them, if you guys have not already done so, to thank them for their bipartisan work on that bill. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Skipper. All right, that brings us to Janet.
Good evening. My name is Janet Bitteto. I am a teacher at Palm Bay High. I've been there for the last 15 years. And I want to say first off the bat, we have a fantastic administration. We have great teachers at our school, but we are facing a real problem, and that concerns discipline at our school. We've been seeing an increasing number of fights this school year, and typically the fights, the students are brought back in after a few days of suspension, or as they like to call it, vacation. The week of the 2nd, we had a couple of fights that were really disturbing. On Wednesday, we had a couple of students who were fighting. They pushed into a pregnant girl, pushed the pregnant girl into a wall. That young lady had to go to the hospital and stay overnight for observation. Then on Thursday, we had students in the gymnasium where 10 students jumped another student. When 2 teachers tried to break up the fight, they were also attacked. The student and teachers were knocked to the ground, kicked in the head, punched, and when the police were involved, they ended up removing about 8 kids in handcuffs. Then on Friday, we had rumors of a school shooting that went through social media. So Friday, 2nd and 3rd period was spent with kids checking out left and right. The front office said they checked out about 800 kids in a class period. So that day, we lost all of our educational time. Those students who caused these problems spent 5 days away from our campus, and that's it. They got a 5-day vacation. The lesson that they're learning is that it's okay if I hit a teacher, it's okay if I hit another student. I'm going to get a vacation, and I'm going to come right back, and I can do that again and again. So my question to the board would be this. If I break up a fight, as a teacher, I am putting myself on the line at risk now of being kicked or punched in the head or whatever the students come up with. But if I don't break up that fight, I'm now risking the students' well-being. And it's not that difficult for a student to get seriously injured in a fight if they fall and hit their head or something like that. I feel like the teachers have gotten a complete lack of training in dealing with these types of issues. There's been a lack of discipline in kids being taken out of our school. And there's a misconception that students are being expelled from their education when they are sent out of our school. The Alternative Learning Center is still getting an education.
Ms. Benedetto, I have to interrupt you as your 3 minutes are up.
Okay.
But I would encourage you to connect with Dr. Sullivan in the back of the room so that we can ensure that we can get some appropriate support there to address those issues.
Thank
And
you.
you can share with her whatever you didn't get the opportunity to say.
Okay.
Thank you. Marcus Hockman.
Is everything not working then?
Does anyone have a live mic that I can? I have no mic.
Mine's not even on. I'm just gonna yell.
Mr. Hockman?
My start.
I think your handheld is working, not the podium mic, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Can I start now?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, Board and Dr. Blackburn. My name is Marcus Hockman. The first issue that I would like to talk about is, I read in the paper also about how you would like to purchase iReady for, I believe, $1.1 million. I don't necessarily have a problem with the program itself. Some teachers are still going back and forth with it, and also parents. The issue that I have is, should we be purchasing any more software for our school district, considering the problems that we have with Enrich, some issues with Edline, and with the EDR situation still in the legal process. So I'm not sure why we're going down that road until we can figure out these issues that we have with the other software programs, okay? The next topic I would like to talk about is political backbone. And what I mean by that is, do you have local community political support? I'm not sure if, as a community, if you have that or not, or if you even really look into doing that or not, to be quite honest, which I think is a mistake. It's good to build relationships with your state legislatures. Hopefully you're building some relationships with your federal legislatures. I don't know if you're doing that or not, or even consider that, okay? But it's extremely important to do that also. Now, some of you might not think political support, getting the community involved, and having them to be support for you might not be a good idea, but the example that I can give is the sales tax. When several of you here and others did the sales tax on your own, it didn't pass. But once you got the community involved, and BSOS involved in doing that, the sales tax passed, okay? Now, also part of that is when, like for this week, going to the state legislatures and you're allowed to speak to them, wouldn't you want to have members of the community go with you? Because in politics, you have to negotiate from a position of strength. Does Brevard County Public Schools and other school boards negotiate from a position of strength? Do you have those community members to support you? Okay? Not sure if you do or not, to be quite honest. It doesn't look like most of the time you do. The only time somebody comes out for an issue out here is if there's something to do with the bathroom, okay? Unfortunately. Now, one solution I would like to see is actually, and I know you might not like this, but another workshop on creating political support group, okay? The next part of also about the political backbone that I would like to bring up is, do you have it? Are you willing to stand up as a collective whole to stand up for what's coming down from the federal state legislatures? I have no problem that you're building those relationships, but you're in politics and you represent us as constituents, schools, teachers, and students. And when things come down, are you willing to stand up for our constituents? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. The board wishes to thank this evening's speakers. Your willingness to speak to the board is appreciated. That moves us into the consent agenda. Dr. Blackburn.
There are 19 agenda items under this category, 4 with prior information.
Thank you, Dr. Blackburn. Does any board member wish to pull any items?
F-26.
Pam, would you please pull item F-26 for discussion from the consent agenda? Any other board members wish to pull any items? Okay, then I will entertain a motion to accept the consent items with the exception of the items that were pulled for discussion of F-26.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Craig, seconded by Mr. Ziegler to accept the consent items with the exception of item F-26. Is there any discussion? Please vote. And the motion passes 5-0. We will move on to the action agenda. Dr. Blackburn.
F-26.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Ziegler, you pulled item F-26. Would you like to motion on that item?
This one working? Yes. Okay, good. F-26, ICOC appointments. Pull this one up here. Normally, I don't even give this much thought because the ICOC is an independent organization, which we prefer to keep at arm's length, but for a particular reason, the way the...
Mr. Ziegler,
yes.
I'm going to interrupt you for just 1 second. Technically, we need a motion on the item prior to discussion.
Okay, move to approve.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Ziegler, seconded by Mr. Susan. Open for discussion to Mr. Ziegler since
Thank
you
you.
motioned.
You're correct. We've always done that wrong, haven't we? Thank you for correcting that. So normally this, we just passed this, and normally, and the ICOC should be an arm's length organization, and they should approve their own people. But because it comes before us, I guess we need to take a look at who the appointees are. And unfortunately, we're bundling them together again, so if somebody has a problem with an individual person, then it's either single them out of the motion or vote against the whole bundle, which I hate to do that when there are people in there that I don't have a problem with. There is an individual in here, Margaret Goodlock, who I do have a problem with based on past interactions, and I would like to separate that out so that I could vote for the other two. So I'd like to make a move to amend the motion to remove Margaret from the list.
So there is a motion on the table to amend the motion to approve, and instead amend the motion to approve Kyle Brown and Brenda Bergener, and address Margaret as a separate motion item.
Correct.
Is there a second to Mr. Ziegler's request to amend the motion? Seconded by Mr. Susan. Is there any discussion on the amended motion to approve Kyle Brown and Brenda Bergener?
I guess I would, to make sure that I have adequate votes, I would have to give you an explanation of why. And the reason, and I'm going to give you the reason why. Unless you want to discuss that, unless if we have a vote to separate it, then we can discuss it in a separate item.
I'll leave that up to you since it was your motion, your direction on discussion.
Well, if it doesn't, if the amendment doesn't pass, then the opportunity doesn't
Correct.
exist. So this is actually has to do with politics. So we just had a speaker speak about that, and this goes back quite some time before many of you were on the board. But there's been just too much negative interaction with this person, with the board, with staff, and with myself, including not just personal attacks on me, but personal attack of my daughter in an event that occurred in 2014, filing what I consider to be fraudulent criminal charges against my daughter. And that just bothers me when somebody brings our children into politics. The situation that occurred, and if the charges were not fraudulent, then the activity itself of trespassing, legal campaign signs, and fraudulent disclaimer is just as bad when talking about character of an individual to appoint to such an important committee. And because of that, I just can't support this person for such an important position.
Does any board member wish to speak in opposition of dividing the topic, the agenda item, to separate out the two candidates from the one candidate? Mr. Craig.
Yes. Well, I appreciate Mr. Ziegler's position. This isn't the time or place for separating individuals. The ICOC is an independent organization. It is appointed and run independently of this board. The only reason we have to approve it is because the state says we have to. And because of any committee that's associated with the school district, we have to approve that, and that's in statute. So by everyone's recognition, this ICOC was built to be a standalone outside of the board and have no outside influence from the board. By separating that, that is violating exactly what we said we wouldn't do. So there's absolutely no way I can support that.
Does anyone like to speak in support of the motion to divide the agenda item? Are we ready for the question?
Yes.
Pam, you need a voice vote?
Yes.
All right, so I need a vote on the motion from Mr. Ziegler and the second from Mr. Susan to amend the approval motion to separate item F26 into two separate items. So we are simply voting on the amendment to separate the item, and we will need a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Nay.
So the motion fails 2-3, Pam, which takes us back to the initial motion, which was to approve item F26. Motion was made by Mr. Ziegler, seconded by Mr. Susan. And do you need a voice vote on that, Pam, or you have it? Okay. If you all, is there any additional discussion on that item prior to call for vote? Okay. Then please vote. Okay, and the vote is 3-2. Does anyone need a break?
No, ma'am.
Excellent. Then we will move on to the action agenda. Dr. Blackburn.
There are 6 items for your consideration. The first one is item G31 on department school-initiated agreements.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion to approve item G31 from Mr. Ziegler, seconded by Mr. Craig. Is there any discussion?
No, ma'am.
Please vote. And the motion passes 5-0.
The next one is item G32 on purchasing solicitations.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
I have a motion from Mr. Ziegler and a second from Mr. Susan to approve the action item G32, purchasing solicitations. Is there any discussion?
No, ma'am.
Please vote. Motion passes 5-0. Dr. Blackburn.
Item G33 is to approve the renewal of Vieira Charter Schools contract.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
It is moved by Mr. Craig and seconded by Mr. Ziegler that we approve the recommendation of the renewal of the Vieira Charter School. Is there any discussion? Please vote. And the vote passes 5-0. Dr. Blackburn.
Item G34 is to approve the renewal of Emma Jewell Charter Schools contract.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
It is motion by Mr. Craig, seconded by Mr. Susan, that we recommend the renewal of the Emma Jewell Charter School. Is there any discussion?
No, ma'am.
Please vote. The motion passes 5-0. Dr. Blackburn.
Item G35 is to approve the writing and submission of the 2017-2022 Magnet Schools Assistance Programs grant application due on April 11, 2017.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
It is.
I have no microphone, so I think I'm tone deaf over here, okay?
It is motion by Mr. Susan, seconded by Ms. Deskovich, that we approve the submission of the Magnet Schools Assistance Program grant, item G35. Is there any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes 5-0. Dr. Blackburn.
Item G36 is to hold a public hearing to evaluate parent petitions received regarding the elementary social studies textbook to determine if further evaluation is needed.
The public hearing is now declared open. We will take first speakers who have signed up to speak, and then anyone else that would like to approach the podium on the public hearing for the materials adoption is welcome to do so. So first, we have Dova Murphy. If you would please approach the podium. Doug, I'm sorry.
Long day.
Mr. Murphy, just as a reminder, the same expectations for public comment that we reviewed earlier also apply to public hearings, so 3 minutes. You know the routine.
I think it's going to be within 3. Hi, my name is Doug Murphy. I'm here to discuss my concerns regarding the coverage of the Islamic history coverage in Pearson 2018 edition of the Florida World History textbook. I'm not here to attempt to discredit any religion, simply to try to get the historical facts straight in the textbook. I was involved in 2013 with the textbook controversy regarding the 2007 edition. It happened to make the front page of Florida Today and made it to major cable networks throughout the nation. It also resulted in the creation of a supplement that had to be used as an alternative to the controversial Chapter 10. The Islamic sections in the new edition are much improved, but there's still a couple of paragraphs that portray Islam in an inaccurate light that does not reflect the true history, and they're serious enough for me to appear here. An example quote, page 124, and I've got references with me. I'm not going to waste the time giving you them, but the quote from the Quran, ethical standards emphasize honesty, generosity, and social justice, meaning human rights. That's a quote from the textbook. Regarding the honesty, the Islamic doctrine of taqiyya allows and even encourages you to lie to achieve your goals if talking to non-Muslims, and it benefits Islam. Is that honesty? Regarding social justice, a man is entitled to have up to 4 wives, but a woman only 1 husband. A man can divorce his wife by making a declaration in front of a judge, irrespective of the woman's consent. Her presence is not required. For a woman to divorce a man, his consent is required. Wife beating is permitted, and I'll justify that in a minute, and men are considered superior to women. Another quote from the textbook. Islam extends rights and protection to women by affirming the spiritual equality of all Muslims. Do the following quotes from the Quran sound like spiritual equality? Your women are a tillage for you, so come unto your tillage as you wish. Discussing the equality of male and female witnesses, quote, and call into witness 2 witnesses, men, or if not men, then 1 man and 2 women. I have 2 more quotes. Men are the managers of the affairs of women, for God has preferred one of them over the other. And lastly, another quote from the Quran, righteous women are therefore obedient, and for those who may be rebellious, admonish and banish them and beat them. Does this sound like social justice? This is political correctness, not at the expense of truth, please. Our young adults deserve the truth. The few inaccuracies can easily be corrected with the addition of a few words or simply the deletion of the sentence.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you.
Lee Boyland.
A lot of new faces on the board this year. I'm Lee Boyland. I was on the textbook review committee with the school district and participated in, I think, a program that has resulted in some very good improvements over what I read in the other textbook. The back sections of the document is much better and reflects history much more accurately. I still have some problems with the first few pages. They're mostly nitpicking except for a couple of examples. I would like to start on page 123, where Khadijah encouraged him, referring to Muhammad, to accept the call to his God, that had the spirit that appeared to him that said it was the angel Gabriel, and I'm here to deliver the message from your God. And that later Muhammad named the God Allah, which is the Arabic name for God. So Allah is, in general, applies to any God. She became the convert to the new faith, is the way it's written in the book. It should be the new, to the faith. It should be the new faith Muhammad named Islam. Muhammad named should be inserted also to make it correct, because Muhammad is the sole source of Islam. And the third paragraph in the section called, still on page 123, the Haraj at Yatra, which is the town that Muhammad went to after he left Mecca. It's now known as Medina, city of the Prophet. Omitted information, again, it was the same problem we had with the first book. Here it is again, is that Muhammad had 2 distinct periods of prophethood. The peaceful version in Mecca, and then the warlike version in Medina. That's not mentioned in the textbook at all. And the whole the whole Mecca situation is just basically blown over with no explanation whatsoever. The book says, and I quote, "The Hajj was the turning point for Islam. Local people welcomed Muhammad and agreed to follow his teachings." That was when he went to Yathrib, which became Medina. And that is totally incorrect. Muhammad was actually fleeing from Mecca, from his tribe. When he arrived, there was 5 Arabic tribes and 3 Jewish tribes, and they were having problems. And the leadership said, "Muhammad, you're a prophet. You're not from this area. Basically, you don't have a dog in the fight. So would you be the judge and settle the disputes?" And he said yes, and he did a good job of that. And he literally became mayor of Yathrib. The problem was he ran out of money, and after 2 years, he had no source of income for him or his followers, the Muslims. So he began to raid, as a pirate, that's what they called it in those days, raid the caravans of his tribe, which resulted in a series of war. So Muhammad was accepted as a judge. They did not accept his religion.
Mr. Borland, I have to interrupt you as your 3 minutes are up, but we certainly appreciate your input.
I'm sorry, I have very bad hearing.
That's okay. I have to interrupt you as your 3 minutes are up.
Okay, if you would like for me to continue, I have more comments.
I can't allow you to continue your comments on this, but I would certainly welcome you to reach out to Ms. Klein and share any information that you have with her.
Very good. I will provide you a copy each by email of my talk. Thank you.
Oh. I'm sorry, Dr. Sullivan would be the one that you would like to share with, not Ms. Klein. And lastly, Hamilton Boone.
Thank you. I apologize being late, but getting from work across town is tough. And just for a note, the United States of America is a constitutional republic. It is not a democracy. So that's very important. I, through the last few weeks, reviewed grades K through 6, weekly readers, and American and world history textbooks. I'll do my best to cover in 3 minutes 7 years worth of education. For TCI 5th grade, America's Past, a couple of things. It downplays American exceptionalism multiple times throughout the book. As far as, and it's funny these gentlemen talked about Islam, but as far as the imprisonment and selling of black Africans, it mentions nothing about the Muslim slave trade that started in the 7th century AD and continued into the 20th century. The estimates are between 14 and 18 million black Africans were enslaved at the hands of Muslims. And again, there's no mention of this. Approximately 80% of all the black Africans ever enslaved and exported, as I said, were through them. And when our slave trade here in England started to abate, theirs flourished. And they still practice that today, by the way, in certain areas of the country. The next book that and there were some problems with the weekly readers, but it was inappropriate questions for kids of that age, is what I found. The National Geographic, I was stunned that it was actually considered because it has no bibliography whatsoever. The opinions of the people that are in the book, not the writers, but the different geologists and such, are what is used as fact. The other thing is that they did the propaganda over and over again of man-made global warming or climate change, whatever you want to call it. And that's not factual. I'm a biologist and chemist by training, and I'll tell you that the scientific method outweighs the computer models each and every day. And the simple fact is, if we are the ones that cause the change to the climate, then let's find out what the weather tomorrow is going to be exactly and what the temperature is going to be. Or better yet, when's the next hurricane going to hit? We can't do that because we don't control anything. One of the chapters said today that we have to make changes to our actions to affect climate change, like switching off lights or turning off faucets. Now, this is propaganda to kids that insinuates that you can control Mother Nature, and you cannot do that.
Mr. Boone, I hate to interrupt you, but your 3 minutes are up. We
That's
thank
quite
you
all
for
right.
sharing your information.
I appreciate the 3 minutes, and again, thank you.
Our pleasure. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the public hearing on the adoption of materials? Okay. Hearing no further speakers, I now declare the public hearing closed. Do any board members feel that further evaluation of the textbooks is needed?
Can I make a few comments?
You may, however, we need a motion in order to open for discussion. So we have two options. We can either motion to reverse the approval given at the January 24th meeting to have more assessment of the textbooks, or we can motion to have the decision given at the January 24th meeting stand. If we get a second on either of those motions, we can then open for discussion, and I will certainly turn that over to you if you would like to make the first motion.
Let someone else make the motion.
Okay.
I'll have comments after that.
Very good.
Move to approve.
So, Mr. Ziegler, just to clarify, am I understanding that you are moving to have the decision given at the January 24th, 2017 meeting stand, because at that meeting we actually approved the recommendation of the textbook adoption?
So we have a recommendation on the table. We have to vote on the recommendation. We can decide what to do once we have discussion, right? So we can table, we can make a motion to whatever, but we've got a recommendation that we have to have a motion on, unless we bring up a completely separate motion. But we have to have discussions. So
in order to discuss, we'd have to have it on the table, so a motion, either way, a motion could get it on the table.
right, motion has to be on the table to have a conversation. And I want to speak to it also, so we've got to get it on the table.
So here is my challenge, Mr. Beisland. I just want to make sure for clarification. The recommendation is to hold a public meeting. The recommendation on this agenda is to hold a public hearing. It is not to approve the recommendation. The recommendation to approve was at the January 24th meeting. The board already voted to approve the materials. We now have a recommendation to hold the public hearing. So really, in order for us to approve or deny the materials, we have to address the prior motion to recommend approval of the materials, do we not?
To evaluate the, yes, but in either case, you need to have a motion, so if Mr. Ziegler want to make a motion to advance this, he could do that with a second, and then we have it on the table. Doesn't mean he has to support that once it's on the table.
So
The point being is a recommendation for public hearing. We're just having the public hearing. So then technically we could have a discussion and then decide what we want to do prior to a motion. Because it's an open hearing. I'm assuming we have input at an open hearing.
Okay.
Correct, Mr. Beislein?
you agree?
We have input at an open hearing.
The recommendation is to hold a public hearing to evaluate the parental petitions.
So then we would, so we're going to approve it to have an additional hearing, or is this the hearing?
That's what the recommendation says.
Okay, so then we should have, then I move to have the hearing.
Okay. So you move to, you make a motion to advance the recommendation, to get it on the floor.
We just had the hearing.
You're having a hearing right now.
We opened the hearing?
That's why the confusion of the way it's written.
Yeah.
It's
It is hard to understand the way, but hold a public hearing to evaluate the petitions, which hasn't happened yet.
No, we just did.
It did happen.
It
We
did
had the public hearing, which is what the recommendation was, which is why the script is to either have a motion to reverse the approval given at the January 24th meeting, or to have a motion to hold the decision given at the January 24th meeting where we already approved the materials. Or I suppose that Mr. Ziegler could move to approve the recommendations contained in the public hearing. would be the simplest way that I see to do it, but you're
You're
the
right.
attorney.
You're exactly right. Anything to get it on the table so you can discuss would be appropriate.
So Mr. Ziegler, move whatever you'd like.
Conversation needs to ensue either way to have the, yeah, because I need to give a little bit of history and some opinions, so I'll move to approve at this point in time.
All right, that'll do it. I need a second.
You move to what?
Move to approve. Although technically, unless we're going to reverse something, there's no motion necessary. If we do nothing, then everything stands. But we need to have some open conversation.
The recommendation you have to take action on the recommendation.
Recommendation is to hold a hearing.
We already took action on the recommendation on the
Hearing is
agenda.
open. Hearing is still open.
Hearing is still open.
No, I closed the hearing.
Oh, did I?
Well,
miss it?
you closed the public discussion of the hearing. We're now back to the action. You've had your public discussion.
Okay, so I hate to be overly technical here,
Right.
but I just want to make sure that we're not misstepping, because what I said and what's going to be recorded in public record is, hearing no further speakers, I now declare the public hearing closed. Should
That's
I
it.
reopen the public hearing to allow for board discussion so that we
No.
are within expectation?
No, because board discussion is not part of the public hearing process. You've accepted the comments from the public. So you've done that part. So now it's back to the board for your action, whatever it might be.
Mr. Ziegler, will you simplify my life by making a motion to have the decision given at the January 24th meeting stand so that we can open for discussion?
Yes. I move to have the decision on January 24th stand so we can have a conversation.
Moved by Mr. Ziegler, seconded by Mr. Craig, to have the decision given at the January 24th, 2017 meeting stand. We are now open for discussion. Mr. Ziegler, having
Thank
moved,
you.
would you like to be the first one to discuss?
Yes, I would.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I know some others are like to input. I'd like to first start with thank the speakers for coming up. As they know, I've been concerned about this. We had that conversation many, many years ago. And having read the book in question back then, I was very concerned about the extensive inaccuracies in a world history book. I am glad to hear that you feel that the revised version is much better. The inaccuracies still don't thrill me. However, I know that we're not going to, nothing's ever going to be perfect. So I don't know, and without actually having seen it, and I apologize for not returning your call yet, I've just been too busy, but I can't at this time, without reading the book, decide whether or not we should reverse that. I haven't had time to look at the specific concerns. As far as the concerns of the book that Mr. Hamilton had about omissions of history, that doesn't, while it'd be nice if we could put everything in history in a history book, I'm not sure the books would be big enough to hold everything that's omitted in history. And I'm not one to decide what is important and what isn't. That's our educators who decide that. And if I recall correctly from our conversations when we went down this road before, it was made clear to us that these books are reference material, and they are not necessarily, they are not the sole reference material on a particular topic. And it's up to the teacher, I guess, how closely they follow them. The changes to history, the inaccuracies, as you stated, do concern me. Well, there were quite a few previous time we went through this, and it definitely warranted putting together a committee, because staff did tell us that they felt they had concerns about the book. So a committee was put together, a diverse committee, and they came up with that supplement. And I think that was a great process, and it worked very well. I don't know how glaring these accuracies are right now to determine if we need to go down that road again. The other concern I have of going down that road is I've got to imagine that we could all find something wrong with every textbook in a school. And how minute of an error is going to warrant the massive effort to analyze and correct. We all agreed it was pretty extensive in that other book. I don't know where we draw the line as to when we revise these things. And of course, we know that returning books is not a practical option because of the cost. The supplement worked very well. I don't have any opposition to holding judgment until we all can look at this to determine how glaringly bad it is. But I am not at a point right now to say overturn what was done in January. I don't have enough information to make that decision.
I can help clarify that because
Go ahead.
I think we've got a few things going on here. Mr. Boone sent us a very extensive spreadsheet of all the issues he had with all the K-6 books, the history books. And the two that he spoke to tonight, one was the National Geographic World History book. And I'd have to agree with him that not having a bibliography or any references at all that's a real concern for a history book. The good news is that staff took that off the list. They saw that, they saw what he sent in, and we're not going with that one. So that's not part of what we're voting in on. That was the second choice, so we're resulting to only the first choice. Problem solved for 6th grade. For 5th grade, the same issue. The book that Mr. Boone referenced that had the most egregious problems was the TCI America's Past. Once again, staff saw the list of problems, gone, not an issue. We've chosen Studies Weekly instead. So then he had a spreadsheet of K through 4 of all the issues with the Studies Weekly. And in my mind, those were more semantic issues. A couple things jumped out at me, so I logged in and looked at them. He had in kindergarten, they talk about Christopher Columbus with 2 sentences, that he was an explorer and that he was born in Italy. And Mr. Boone said, you know, couldn't we mention America in there somewhere? And I mean, I agree with that, but is that reason to not vote for the Studies Weeklies? I went back to Ms. Klein, and Ms. Klein said, that's where the teacher's supposed to supplement, right? That the 2 sentences are supposed to be conversation stimulators. Now the teacher can come in and hopefully teach in 1492 Columbus sailed the ocean. That's what I was looking for in the book. So to summarize that, the 2 books that you had the biggest problem with are gone. We're down to the K4. I think there's minor problems, no reason to overrule. The 2 books that you gentlemen spoke to, I feel like you're talking about secondary book, the high school book, is that correct? Okay, so that is Mr. Boyland, is that what you?
Yeah, the world history program.
Okay, that, and what we're voting on right now is the K-6 history books. We're also, it's coming up to put into the 30-day process tonight the high school history books, the secondary books. So this process will go on 30 days from now for the high school books. We're voting tonight to now open the public. So you can now file petitions like Mr. Boone did for the high school books after tonight if we vote for that. So I think I just clarified all of that. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Deskovich, for wrapping things up so nicely on that. Very good. Any additional discussion, Mr. Susan?
I don't feel like sharing.
Being the fact that I was one of the ones that actually taught this in high school before I became a board member, I wanted to kind of talk to you guys about some of the pieces to this. Is that the world history books that you're talking to and referring to, we as teachers used to go out and challenge our students to find problems throughout them. And I did that in American history, American government, world history, and all of them. You would find littered with problems that you would have, and the kids would take it. We tore out the indexes in the back of the book and would use it as a point to argue when these topics came up. I wanted to tell you that not only is there this, but there's other problems, but in the overall scheme of things, I will tell you that a teacher that teaches out of a book in our county is not a very good teacher. They use it as a resource along with all the other resources. So going forward with all the other things that we do, to not get caught up on 1 or 2 couple of words, just wanted to kind of touch base with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Susan. Is there any additional discussion?
No, but I would like to ask if we can make sure we clarify our hearing process flow in the future, because I don't think it's very clear where we're starting and where we're ending. It's almost as if there's 2 separate things going on. So can we review that for future?
There are two separate things going on
Not
because we
clear.
have two different sets of adoptions. And part of the confusion there, I will take ownership for, because when I looked at our speaker list and saw the textbook topic and public hearing, I saw textbook topic and assumed that they were here on the public hearing, which was the K through 6, so I lumped them in with the public hearing presentation. Had I included them in general public comments in the beginning of the meeting, then you would have only heard Mr. Boone on the K-6 textbook adoption, and I think that would have eliminated some confusion. So I apologize, and I will work on process clarification moving forward. So, Mr. Craig.
I just wanted to thank Mr. Boone for taking the time to go through things. What you sent us was great because it allowed me to get back in, like Ms. Deskovich said, get into the textbook and look at what you pointed out. And I'm glad that you brought those things up about the books that we didn't choose. Rightfully so. So I do appreciate your time because I know it takes a lot of time to go do that. So thank you.
Is there any additional discussion?
Just make a clarification, as I understand Mr. Ziegler's motion is that no further assessment is needed at this point.
Correct. Yes.
Correct? Okay.
The way it's written in the language is not correct of what the recommendation is.
But that's the gist of it, isn't it?
Correct.
Okay.
That was what I wanted.
Are we ready for the question?
Yes.
Pam, do you need a voice vote?
One tiny thing. Do we have to say that the motion is to approve the first options to make sure those other two books are excluded from the second option? I'm not sure how it's written, but the second option, or if you look on your screen, it still has the second options on there. I want to make sure that we don't have a class or a school somewhere picking up that National Geographic book. Does that make sense? I mean, Ms. Klein told me that we're using the first books, correct? She's shaking her head yes, but I think in our motion it should say we're approving the...
In January, these were approved, but now they've taken them off the list, is what you were saying, Ms. Deskovich?
No,
Now I'm getting a no.
They were not approved. What we approved in January was the first recommendation, the K-5 Studies Weekly and the Grade 6 Teachers Curriculum Institute History Live, which is why I believe that the motion is being put forth to have the decision at the January 24th meeting stand as to eliminate any confusion with what's been put onto this agenda item. Once again, a process issue I think we need to address going forward. For the moment, though, we have a motion in front of us to have the decision given at the January 24th meeting stand. Motion by Mr. Ziegler, seconded by Mr. Craig, and I will ask for a vote. I can't vote. Pam, we're going to do a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, now it came up.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Yes. Okay. We will move on to the information agenda, which includes items for board review and will be brought back for action at a subsequent meeting. No action will be taken on these items tonight. Dr. Blackburn.
There are 2 items under the information category.
Does any member wish to discuss any of the information items? Okay. We are now at the board member reports and discussion points section. In addition to discussion points, I request that board members please include any information requests to be placed on board assigned tasks during this time as well. Any board members have a board report? Ms. Deskovich has a discussion item. Did you have?
You want to go to the item, or do you want?
Board reports, and then we'll go to item. Okay. Mr. Craig.
I just wanted to just take a quick moment to make sure that after yesterday's article in a couple of the speakers and a few of the emails that we've received over the last probably 24 hours, Ms. Glenn wrote a great article, front page, about our budget priorities workshop and the results of that. I think there is maybe a misconception that that is truly what the budget is. That is not what the budget is. Our CFO, Ms. Erker, is starting that process, and that budget workshop was the beginning of discussions about budget priorities that the board may have going forward. That doesn't mean that we are buying some software program. It doesn't mean we're doing this or that. It means that we have gone through a long list of things that the district may see as something beneficial to the educational process, and therefore we prioritize things based on those. That doesn't mean that we will ever have the money to do all the things on there. We certainly we prioritize a few of the top things, top probably 1 to 4 or so that we hope will get covered. But I want to make sure that people watching understand that that is not what our budget is, will look like, and that those things are not just an automatic thing that we've already decided on. Those were topics for discussion, thus the workshop format, so that all the board members could get input into things that the staff had brought forward to us that were critical to their individual departments, so that we could have that free discussion and see where everybody was thinking. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, because there was a little bit of misconception there. But Ms. Glenn, thank you for your article. Appreciate it.
And thank you for that important clarification, Mr. Craig. Other board member report, Mr. Ziegler.
Thank you, Mr. Craig, for stating that. And I believe there's some also that thought that those items on there were specifically going to be implemented with the use of sales tax too, which is incorrect. That has nothing to do with that. Two separate things. So good point to bring that up for clarification. I just wanted to let everybody know that tomorrow is the Southern Division Elementary Art and Science Fair at the Melbourne Auditorium. Open houses from 3 to 6:30, Art Awards 6:30, Science Awards at 7. And if you haven't been to an elementary science and arts award or fair just to see what they've done, it's amazing. Just like Mr. Craig was saying about the fifth graders and talking about, I don't even understand what you were telling us you were talking about. These kids are just amazing. So you got to stop by and see that at the Melbourne Auditorium tomorrow.
Wanted to talk just a second about the trades program and construction program that we've got going on inside the school board. Right now we have construction programs at Astronaut, Melbourne, and Palm Bay. And they've been kind of underutilized and not talked about a lot over the years. Most recently, the HBCA and the Associated Builders and Contractors have come on board, along with the Central Florida Trades Union and some other groups, to kind of revamp all of our construction schools and kind of work with them on just expanding what they currently have. Right now, they are looking at sponsorships for each one of the construction schools by a major general contractor inside the industries. For example, Certified General Contractors is going to sponsor Palm Bay Construction, right? Their high school construction program. And in doing so, they're going to put in mentors and give internships and opportunities for a lot of the kids that are there. They're also going to start utilizing projects that those companies that may be able to bring to them as samples, so that the kids, instead of learning inside the textbooks and being jammed into what the curriculum's just been turning out, they're actually going to be working on projects that they see out inside the community, which is amazing. They also move towards expanding what's known as the STAR program, which is a program through the Department of Education for vocational rehab. So any kid with a 504 and IEP that qualifies will be able to go to work inside of either our schools or the community over the summer. Right now, our transportation is looking at trying to hire 30 kids through this said program to work on our buses and our fleet to renovate them over the summer. The construction program also is, Mr. Arnott is looking at bringing in the Central Florida Trades Union and the Associated Builders and Contractors to teach apprenticeship programs post-graduation at our adult ed centers at night. And that's going on in the process right now. It's being used over in Orlando. And the other piece to the whole pie is what I thought was pretty cool, was that Associated Builders and HBCA got together and they said that they're going to hold a competition at the end of this year where our 3 construction schools can go against each other. The winners with this diversified construction programs is being sponsored by Milwaukee Tools, and they're going to give them Milwaukee Tools, and then the winners will also be allowed to go to, it's like Lake City, where there's another program for construction. So to say the least, after this all said and done, the ABC lady's going to be here on Friday. She said that if all this stuff starts coming together, that this will probably be the best construction program in the state of Florida. That was pretty impressive. So I just wanted to say it was a good job. And that's existing infrastructure, nothing special. It's just expanding what we already have. I think that there's a lot of those programs here in our district that we need to be looking at and saying, hey, we do have trades here. How can we help what we have build to get better? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your work on that, Mr. Susan. Ms. Deskovich, do you have a board report in addition to your discussion topic? Okay. Then I will turn to Ms. Deskovich for discussion of the lice policy.
So happy I get to bring this up. The lice lady. I've gotten several emails from parents about our lice policy. And as a parent myself, with a child in elementary school and one that obviously was in elementary school, our policy is, I have concerns with our policy. I've spoken with the health department, with Dr. Theddy, and with a few others. And we are in a line with many other districts, but there are districts that are doing it differently. And so I thought it would be a good time for us to discuss. I have no idea where each of you stand on our lice policy, if you know what our lice policy is, but I think I would like to at least hear a discussion. If anyone else has concerns like I do, I'd like to know it. Anyone else consider ever, I mean, does anyone know what our lice policy is? Well, for example, Lee County, here, they can come to school with nets. As long as there's no live lice crawling around, they can come to school. Lee County and a few other counties in Florida have stood firm, and there's research that proves, and they, in their policy, state that the organization that's behind head lice treatment also stands firm and says that you should not allow children back in school with nets. The parents, have you guys gotten any emails, or is it just me? Why am I the lice lady?
I will tell you, Ms. Deskovich, I'm not getting emails about the lice policy currently. However, it is rare that I am on the campus at my daughter's school and there is not some discussion of it taking place someplace in the school. So although I'm not getting the emails, I certainly do hear the concerns.
The things I would like us to look at are, one, do we want to continue with the no knit policy, or with the you can have knits in your head policy, and two, and this is where it gets a little dicey, and I've seen parents just flip out about this, there's no notification. The notification, at least where my children go to school, is school-wide. So you get this general thing in the newsletter that some people read, some people don't, that says, there's lice in our school, and people may or may not pay attention to that, where if someone told me it was in my classroom, right, then I know to spray my kid's head every morning. If I had a daughter, I'd braid her hair. But then you get into, Dr. Theddy said, FERPA problems. But other schools are doing it. Maybe there's a creative way we can notify parents without ever alluding to who it might be. We want to protect, obviously, each child's, we don't want them to feel secure and not pointed out or ridiculed. But those are my two issues, the notification and the coming to school with nits.
Mr. Susan?
One of the issues that you have is the poor kid whose parents won't help treat it. So what do we do in that solution? I'm all about it, but how do you keep that kid from coming to school where their parents are not treating it? Because I've seen that's a situation in the past where there may be a parent who is not as involved in that kid's life, and it's just a constant reoccurring problem. So how do we get that?
Can we get Dr. Theddy up here on that? I mean, I think you're now.
That's the one thing here that I always have found is that it's not so much.
Well, what do we do now if they have live lice?
And just keep coming back.
No, our policy says if they have live lice, they can't be in the classroom.
Right,
so.
but then they just keep coming back with the same problem because it won't get fixed. Does that make sense to you? And then we have the same kid out for so much time because of that, and then they run into the absences and all that.
We do have issues with what you're talking about, Mr. Susan, and what we do with that is we work through the Department of Health. The Department of Health works directly with the parent to help them access what they need to treat the lice.
Are they very successful, Dr. Theddy, in this process? Or is this just a thing that they come in, they say, hey, this is what you got to do, and then it just keeps happening?
I don't have that data to tell you. We don't always get notification from parents that their children even have lice. And unless it's something that a teacher or a principal or some other person in the school
Sees it.
notices, we may not even know that
Until
there's
it's-
a child there with lice.
And Ms. Daskovich, I have to thank you because I'm now itching.
I want to, but I know we're being filmed. I'm like,
Conversation.
I've been reading this stuff for days at home, and I'm at the
Yes.
counter always. It's not a comfortable topic, but one of the emails, I think I forwarded the one email to the whole board about the gentleman whose daughter's had it 4 times this year because they don't notify you, it's not taken care of, and it's a never-ending cycle, at least where my son's at school.
Mr. Craig?
So can we get maybe ask the superintendent and ask Dr. Blackburn to maybe get us a new look at, why does our policy say what it does now? Is there a medical reason that we allow? I mean, there had to have been a reason why it was written that way to begin with, that nits are allowed, but live aren't.
I believe the nits are the eggs, right? Is that
there has to
true?
be
Yeah.
some sort of reason there. If there isn't a reason and it was just a random thing and we have medical advice that recommends otherwise, then I think we need to look at that. But can we do that, Dr. Blackburn? Can we get somebody to give us a recommendation? What you all recommend?
Dr. Theddy, no. I mean, she's very knowledgeable.
What is your recommendation?
The policy is based on the Centers for Disease Control advice, along with the National Association of School Nurses and the American Academy of Pediatrics. That policy was developed, I can't tell you the exact year, but it's probably been 10 or 15 years now since the policy was developed, and it's based on that same advice that still holds true to this time.
So it's still the same CDC and everybody still recommends the same thing?
Yes.
And then Lee County says that they are standing strong with the national, and I don't even know how to say the word, PEDICULOSIS Association. Those are the experts apparently in lice. That they stand with the no-nit policy. So there's an expert on the other side for your reference.
So I think, and I get where you're coming from, Mr. Craig. I think basically what Dr. Theddy is saying is, my recommendation is that we maintain where we're at because we're following the recommendation of these 3 major organizations that deal with this situation. Not to put words in your mouth, Dr. Theddy, but I think that was kind of the looks that I was getting when that request was made. I am curious, however, and I know you say that oftentimes parents don't tell us if their children have lice, but one of the things that I suspect part of the reason for going with the no live lice but allowing nits is to minimize absences.
That is true.
I'm curious if we have the ability, without violating FERPA, to gather data on related absence. So for example, if my child comes, and my daughter will scream to the high hills if I give any indication that she is the one with lice. However, just using her hypothetically, if my daughter comes home with lice and I treat her and I send her back to school, but I don't get all of the nits out of her hair, maybe I just do the shampoo or whatever and send her back, she still has nits. She infects the girl next to her who borrowed her jacket that morning. Now that child is going to miss a day of school for treatment. Do you see what I'm getting at? Like, is there a spiral to us allowing this one child? Are we actually creating more related absences in other students?
I don't have any data to support or refute that one way or another because we don't know that. We don't know that the lice came from the school to begin with. They seem to be a springtime problem for whatever reason. It comes up this time every year. There's no data in the system that says a child was absent because of head lice. So a child could have been absent because a parent kept the child home but never notified the school that the reason they kept the child home was due to head lice, or that a jacket or a hairbrush or a hat or a hair clip had been shared among students. We do not have that information.
Mr. Ziegler.
While it'd be great to come up with a solution to curb the problem, I caution on a policy that is unenforceable. What I mean by that is while most people are diligent, caring parents and going to address the problem with their child, there's no guarantee you're going to go through a child's head and see everything and not miss something, and then they go to school. And nobody at school is going to be checking thoroughly. So while we can say that, unless we have somebody at the gate checking these things, it's going to be really, really hard to enforce. So I think, and I think the logic has been education and communication is really the best tool. But apparently we're not doing a good enough job in communication because we're afraid of HIPAA and FERPA and all that other stuff. So I think that's the better area to focus on, providing the assistance as opposed to, I don't want to say nitpicking, but that's what I'm thinking.
It's been a long day. May I, Misty?
Yes.
Okay. Just to refute that a little bit, because our policy now says the student, if they had live lice, and first of all, if they have live lice, we don't even send them home. We send them back to class till the end of the day. Just saying. But they must be rechecked before they come back to school by a Department of Health clinic staff. So we do have a gatekeeper there. They come back in, they get their head checked. No, we've caught it now. We know they have live lice. We let them stay at school. But before they can come back to school another day, they have to be checked by the clinic before they can come back into school. And for example, Lee County has it. They see live lice or teacher reports it or something. They can't go back to class, right? Gather your stuff, just like if you had a fever, we're going to call your mom. You have live lice. And they're supposed to stay out of school. And the same gatekeeper for them to come back checks, but checks for nits and lice, where we just check for live lice.
My concern is it's very difficult to be thorough in that check. I've gone through it. I'm sure almost everybody's gone through it. It's just very, very difficult to be thorough.
I'll speak real quick.
Mr. Susan?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I just wanted to talk to this, that it shouldn't be an issue to, I've received letters and stuff like that at home when my teacher's class has, my daughter's class has lice, anything like that, and I feel very strongly with the fact that if we're going to keep reoccurring it, and there is a solution for the back end for the students that are out more often, I feel like that is a strong case to move forward with a policy to create this. I really do.
A policy to create what?
Exactly what Tina's saying.
No nit, no lice, no.
Yes.
So,
Do more research.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying we're going to do it right now.
Tonight.
Yeah.
I wanted to feel everybody out. And the other issue that I had, besides the no nits, is the notification, and that I think has to be a little bit more creative.
Yeah.
And I don't have the solution, but we need to know, and it's just too vague. I don't know if you have any suggestions or ideas of how we can be a little bit. Some schools don't do anything. Some post it in the newsletter. It's very hokey.
I would say that individual classroom notification would be a violation of FERPA. We have had issues with isolation of students who have had lice because of things like that. A parent will say, my child has lice, and then we've had trouble with that as we've gone through the rest of the year with that child. I would not be opposed to grade level notifications, but the notification is pretty much similar to what you're talking about. Government and Community Relations helped last year with creation of the flyer that I sent you, that all the schools have, and when they see a problem, they all received it at the beginning of this school year to use periodically through the year as they've seen a need to use it. I would not advocate in any way for the district to put any notification to individual classrooms. I would be okay with grade level notifications, because with a grade level notification, if you have more than 2 grade levels at that school, you are able to more closely protect the identity of the student, but you can't do that when you're talking about 1 grade level or 1 classroom. We do the whole school notification because, like I said, we don't always know when a child has lice. We will hear that things are being posted on Facebook. I'll go back to the school and say, how many children have you had in your clinic with lice? And when the answer is 1, and we don't know about the rest of the students, it's impossible for us to verify that there's a lice outbreak that's the responsibility of the school or something happening at the school. So it's a hard topic for parents. People have a lot of feelings about head lice. I totally understand that. The concern I have with a no nits policy is we already struggle deeply with attendance, and we struggle with eradicating the problem and keeping kids in school. And if we go to a policy that, or even a suggestion of a policy that includes no nits, we increase staff time in looking at that each day, and we send kids home when we already have problems getting parents sometimes to come in and pick them up. That's part of the reason the guidance from the CDC, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the National Association of School Nurses says to keep them in school all day. I don't know if the rationale behind that is because pulling them out of school loses a day's instruction when the parent could deal with the problem at home that evening, send them back to school for the live lice check the next day, or if it's because having a child sit in the clinic all day is also counterproductive.
I'll do some research.
So, it sounds like perhaps, and Dr. Blackburn, please interrupt if you're interpreting differently, that there is certainly room for us to enact grade level notification on lice cases that we know of. And then the second, and then I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Blackburn, is I wonder if we can't be a little bit more proactive about communicating about prevention. If we know that it tends to be a spring issue, perhaps Mr. Reed can assist with deer in the headlights. Perhaps Mr. Reed can assist with getting some communication out, especially to our elementary schools where we tend to see it the most, regarding some preventative measures through the various means that you have to get word out. I mean, I know we certainly have some preventative measures that we take in our house, just because it tends to be kind of a chronic issue at the school. So maybe if we can get some information out to families on some preventative actions that they could take, that would help to decrease the notifications necessary.
We can certainly do that.
Dr. Blackburn?
Well, I think Dr. Theddy, just mentioned, I don't think anything prevents us from communicating proactively. If this is primarily a season, I know it's all year long, but if we do see spikes during a certain season, I'm sure we can put some proactive communications around that. But as far as the potential of violating FERPA, I agree with what Dr. Theddy said, that going to a classroom notification piece would potentially violate FERPA for said student. Grade level, I would ask that staff be given an opportunity to take a look at it, and if, and not to respond knee-jerk, this evening, but take a look at it, and if staff feels so compelled to bring a recommendation back, either to modify or to keep the same.
Good? Good. Okay. Then I think we are at Dr. Blackburn with a superintendent's report.
No report.
I'm sorry?
No report. I'm feeling a little itchy, but other than that, no report.
He's got a beard.
Can beards get lice?
Lice don't discriminate. They're in beards too, I'm sure. Okay. There being no further business, this meeting is now officially adjourned.